25 years of joy, 25 years of media excellence. Hello and welcome to the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. And I'm sure you've guessed it. Our focus for tonight is the State of the Nation address. We'll focus on the economy, on the business side of things, as this is the business edition of PM. And we'll delve into the ins and outs of what the president had to say in Parliament today. We'll look at the economy, we'll look at the banking sector reforms, we'll touch on the tourism sector and other things that focus on particularly the macroeconomy or the economy as a whole and in the business world on this edition tonight. And to help me do that, my first guest is here. My other guest will join us via Skype. The one in studio is Mr. Appiah Kusi Adomako. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's the director of CATS International. And Dr. Ebo Texin will be joining us via Skype. He's an economist at the University of Ghana, Economics Department. And we'll be delving into all these things and just see how, indeed, if this truly reflects the true state of our own economy as Ghanaians. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back. Right, you're welcome back from the break, and this is the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. I'm going to cut straight to Mr. Adomako to get his preliminary comments on what he felt the State of the Nation did to his own state today. Mr. Adomako, were you in awe? Was it business as usual? Was there something in there for you? Your general overview of today's delivery by the president?
I would say that, thank you very much, our lovely viewers of PM Express. I'd like to say that the president's speech was more like, it wasn't anything new. Mm-hmm. It was more like a collection of speeches that he has delivered across various forums that has been put together and presented before parliamentarians. Because actually I didn't see anything entirely new, except that next week those who lost their money from the financial sector collapse, microfinance institutions, they're all going to get, they will start paying them.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one thing that was so definitive. And also some of the statistics that the president also gave about 1D, 1F.
The number of jobs is created, the projects that are in play.
Yes,
and etc.
most of all these are kind of public records that we already knew. So we were expecting the president to tell us something that we didn't know.
Okay. But Mr. Adomako, one may argue that budget statements perhaps will convey better new things that are happening or new things we want to do. And like you said, things are always happening. So more or less we are abreast. This is just a snapshot of the state of the economy. One may say we shouldn't expect much, but rather a highlight of key issues affecting Ghana as a country. What would you have to say in response to something like that?
I mean, I agree with you that he was just giving us the state, like gone to the hospital to see the physician. Physician will run a lab test on you and tell you the state of your health. But then before you sign off from his office, the physician will also tell you that going forward, A, B, C, and D. So we also expect the president to tell Ghanaians in terms of where he wants to put Ghana to in the next 10 years. I mean, how is he going to prepare us to be able to compete in this rapidly changing world? We've seen that nations like China, India, and European countries are investing in technology. I mean, we didn't see anything of that sort other than the basic thing that we've always been hearing from the president. I mean, one, free SHS and those things are good, but we also need to move from the base of the pyramid and then also get to the top of the pyramid so that Ghana can also become competitive in the next decade, as we might be taken away by surprise, like you see how Chinese have been able to overtake America when it comes to 5G technology. So as a leader, you should be able to inspire your people with hope, and that alone can also, ginger them to do something great.
One may argue he touted our credentials in his speech, and these credentials, from what the authorities argue, they are working to sustain some of these things. Let me give you one example. So the president referenced a story about Bloomberg, from Bloomberg, and I went to check. It was a Bloomberg opinion piece written by Noah Smith, and the title was "Why Ghana is Africa's Top Candidate for an Economic Leap." Such a story written by, for lack of a better word, an outsider on Ghana's economy. He's looking at the fundamentals. This person may have no stake or material stake in our economy. He's looking at data, he's looking at numbers, and things seem good for us. Wouldn't you agree that it may not necessarily have to be a pronouncement of new things, but some of these things, as citizens, we can infer and see that indeed things are being done. And he's promised, he said that they are working to ensure that everything is done right in the economy. Given even this example from the Bloomberg story, don't you think all is well and good?
I mean, I'm not a pessimist. And looking around, we've seen that there has been lots of transformation since this government took over in January 2017. We've seen that inflation rate has come below 8%. We've seen that our balance of payment has improved. We've seen that our forest cover has also improved. And these things are all indicative that, Ghana, we are on the path of progress. However, I think if we also compare ourselves with our classmates that we were all enrolled in the same class in the 1960s, the South Koreans and the Malaysians, and then we see ourselves now, then our performance now is still not the best. In African terms, we might be good, but then when you rank yourself among the Committee of Nations, your performance is still not outstanding. And for me, I think that Ghana has the capacity to be able to do better than where we find ourselves.
And I think, just to add on, if you look in the article, the Bloomberg story that the president referenced, you realize that the story gives us a positive, sentiment, positive outlook, but they emphasize the fact that our dependence on commodities may not necessarily be negative. However, if we don't break free of that chain, there may be some negative effects on us. Mr. Adomako, you are way older than me in terms of age. You've been living in Ghana for a long time. Teasing out this issue about dependence on commodities, it's the very lifeline of the country. Gold, cocoa, recently oil, had timber, etc. Do you think we are putting measures in place as a country, irrespective of governments who have come in and out, to make that leap to a state where manufacturing can raise the necessary jobs and we reduce the dependence on commodities and start transitioning into the manufacturing stage, who can give us the boom? Because we've leapfrogged from the resource stage into the services. What's your outlook or your take on Ghana's dependence on commodities and the way forward?
Okay. I think the economy is still largely a commodity-ridden economy. Anytime our commodity prices go low, we see the impact. And I think the worst case was in 2014.
Yeah.
And now with also the issue in China, crude oil prices are also expected to go down, and that could also affect
China's demand for crude is very high.
Yes. And so as a country, how are we able to transition? I'm not saying that we should close our Jubilee field and all the fields and start doing something new. We should be able to start building our economy. Now we are Ghana beyond aid. So I think we also need to look at Ghana beyond commodity economy. Mm-hmm. That is that narrative that perhaps the president could also start championing. And how do you do that? Then you need to start investing in research and technology. These things, do not occur overnight. It comes through persistent work of dedication. You need to commit things to happen. And it seems we are not walking on that trajectory. We are kind of, creeping like a horse and at the backy base, trying to get a coffee at the lunch counter. But I think that the president or the government, we need to increase our expenditure in science and R&D as a country. Currently, you see that not much of resources are going to research and development in this country. our institutions of research and academia, they don't get funding for their research. And when you are not investing in these key institutions that can determine your future, then you don't expect to be able to win the future. America in 1960s, when Soviet Union was able to put man in the moon, the US said, look, we're also going to do the same. Kennedy government invested heavily in space exploration. And so now we are all benefiting from the US expedition to the moon and all these technologies that have come. What are we doing as a country to also invest in science and technology? Okay. What are even beyond science and technology? There are other areas that we can invest to be able to retool the way we do things so that Ghana can be competitive. I think that you cannot be competitive in your commodity. Commodities are, given to you by nature. You don't have to do anything to get commodities. But what you do with what you get from the commodity and what you also do with the resources that you have, and more importantly, now we know that most countries are saying that in the next 20 years they are going to move away from fossil fuel machines. So very soon, nobody will come and buy your crude oil. Mm-hmm. And so as a country, what are we preparing our economy for? So that if European countries say, look, in 2040, no car made in Europe will have to run on petrol or diesel, then we'll not be able to sell our crude oil. So as a country, we need to look into the future and prepare for it so that we don't get there and get, stranded, like it's always happening in this country.
We would come back, we'll touch on you mentioned industrialization, we'll come back to the 1D, 1F and some of the things the president shared. I want us to go straight to Skype and talk to Dr. Texan. If we have him on, Dr. Texan, can you hear me? Hello, Dr. Texan, can you hear me? Okay, it seems we're having a little challenge with the Skype in there. I'll continue on with Mr. Adomako. When we have Doc, we'll bring him right back and we'll continue our discussion. Mr. Adomako raised the point about 1D, 1F. We had some infographics coming in from the State of the Nation address, and I think these came in from official sources. We have some on the One District, One Factory. If Mr. Yalforson has them, can he display them for me while we delve into the discussions on them? So we have, there's one in front of me here that says, Mr. Adomako, I shared this with you earlier on.
Yes.
A total of 181 projects spread across the 112 districts are currently at various stages of the implementation under the program. For me, reading this, I think it's good news. Then it says, it is envisaged, that's from the president, it is envisaged that 1D, 1F initiative will generate a total of 228,866 direct and indirect jobs. Again, struggling existing businesses are also being revived and expanded under the 1D, 1F scheme. There is nothing contrary to the philosophy that underpins 1D, 1F if an already existing enterprise is helped to expand and employ more people. So, I see here elements of hope, I see here elements of optimism, and I see that if we sustain this 1D, 1F, it may bode well for us. Am I looking at it wrongly, or that's the right sentiment?
No, I think that's the right sentiment. And I think the president, what we've also seen since they came in 2017, January, is to also tackle the economy from the fundamentals. And one of your fundamentals is to be able to ensure that you have a very strong industrial sector built on value chain linkages. Yes. So I think that government is doing well on 1D, 1F. And once we are able to reach its peak, I think the job that the president pretend, almost 250,000 jobs, direct and indirect, will be able to get them. And most of our brothers and sisters who are roaming the street will be able to find a place to work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
I want us to pivot a bit to the banking sector. We've discussed this since 2017. We're in the third year of discussions on the financial sector. And I think it's a selling point for this party in terms of they enforcing the cleanup. And going through what the president said, I gleaned 4 main themes from this.
Okay.
And for our viewers, that's some of the infographics from the banking sector. Later on, we'll bring you the 1D, 1F one. Apologies for that. We'll delve into a bit more detail on this. But Mr. Adomako, one thing that came up was, and I said this earlier on, around 5 p.m. on our TV show, Business Live, here on Joy News. And the president spoke about the fact that he hopes lessons have been learned, and this will serve as a healthy caution to those who are offered unrealistic interest rates on deposits. For me, I saw this as a very good message. However, in there lies the issue of financial literacy. I remember last week or so, a group came on this very network. They had presented a petition to the finance minister for them to take steps to revamp the national financial literacy agenda. Mr. Adomako, we've gone through a very shaky period. At the core of this was a plethora of issues, but greed was also part, and financial illiteracy was also part. Will it be out of place if we saw a national financial literacy agenda like this group I'm talking about was discussing? Do you think we are at a point where we need this in the country? We need to inform, we need to educate people, particularly those at the lower end, on the ins and outs of financial literacy?
Okay, Philip. Just last year, before December, World Bank is supporting Ministry of Finance to do a study as well as a campaign on financial literacy and also demand for financial services across the country. Mm-hmm. And they are looking to hire consultants that will lead the advocacy and communication strategy, so that people will be more enlightened about where to save your money and what are the things to look for when you are going to invest somewhere. Mm-hmm. But I think the financial literacy, as we've seen, we know that if you look at even men's gold, for example, or those businesses that were promising high interest rates, you realize that those who are even working in the financial sector, just last Monday, somebody confided in me that, she works with one of the financial institutions and she had her money locked up in one of these closed Ponzi schemes that we have.
So this is somebody who is in the field of financial services. Yes. Wouldn't you agree with me, Adomako, that that one is not a matter of literacy, it's a matter of greed?
Yes. So I think there's an illicit intercourse between greed and illiteracy.
I like that, illicit intercourse.
Yes. And also, I also think that the state institution, we need to also have Financial Intelligence Bureau, which we have them, Financial FIC. Yes. They always wait and allow all these things to happen, right? They should be able to gather information like BNI gathers information. As soon as they realize that any institution has been set up to do this, they go around, look at their books, and if they're not doing the right thing, they shut it down, and then before people start losing their money. And I think that is something that also both at the government side and also the demand side of you need to sensitize consumers, the public, about financial literacy, but also state institutions have to do their work. If you look at men's gold, for example, Bank of Ghana came to issue a notice that men's gold is not licensed to do what they were doing, but then even there were people who were fighting against the Bank of Ghana for coming that release. And I think that I blame that the attitude of SEC and Minerals Commission. If those two institutions had acted on the same page, I think that they would have saved Ghanaians from the traumas of having to get their monies locked up with that institution.
You raised a very important point, and this was one of the causes of the sector's woes. There were gaps in information flow, and last year, or in 2018, between 2018 and 2019, we instituted the Financial Stability Advisory Council, where all the members of the financial sphere now sit, meet, and exchange information, which some have argued. And I remember last week I spoke to the CEO of the National Pensions Regulatory Authority, and he was emphasizing that this Financial Stability Advisory Council is one of the reasons, or it's going to be one of the stepping stones for them solving a lot of problems in the financial sector. So I think it's important, because you just mentioned the Minerals Commission, SEC, that was in the past. But I think now with this, maybe we should see some positive improvement.
Yes, I think with what has happened, but one thing I've also known in this country is that we always don't learn our lessons very well. In some jurisdiction, when anything bad happens, the laws are rewritten, and then to ensure that all the gaps are closed, so that the thing doesn't happen again. But in Ghana, in 10 or 20 years' time, we'll still go back to where we are now, unless we say that never again. But in Ghana, always never again, but we see it happening again.
Way of going back. I think we can now go on Skype and speak to Dr. Texan. Hello, Dr. Texan. Good evening. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Philip, good evening. I can hear you. Good evening to your viewers.
Fantastic, Doc. Pleasure to have you here. So, Mr. Adomako was stating earlier on that he felt there was nothing really new in the President's State of the Nation address. He was expecting some pronouncements, some announcements, something to inspire and move us. As an economist, particularly on the side of the economy, banking sector reforms, etc., do you, as a first question to you, general overview, do you feel there was something in there that was business as usual, or there was some new stuff in there, or nothing new at all?
I mean, really, it's a State of Nation address, and so you expect the President to come and talk to us about the nation as we have it now. Obviously, there were things that were refreshing to hear from the President, and it's a yearly event, and given that, for me as an economist, Dr. Baumi had last week or 2 weeks ago said something about the economy at the town hall meeting. There wasn't much said about the economy, but the other aspects of the State of Nation address that I thought that were simple things that it was exciting to hear those things. For instance, we looking beyond the year of return to beyond the return, and trying to make Ghana an attractive destination for Ghana to be a destination for investments, in terms of getting all over the world to come back and invest in the economy here. It is their second home. And also the fact that we build very strong relations with some countries like Germany, France, and I also spoke about the Chinese, spoke about the security, tourism in the region. These are all very important things that about the economy. And more refreshing, he spoke about agriculture and how the practice of food and stocks and other interventions in the agricultural sector have led to the growth of the sector from the 2.9 that he made in the office to almost 6.8%. So there are so many things that he said that are refreshing, and I don't think that it's business as usual.
Okay, Doc, let me zoom in a bit on the economy part. You started off mentioning the year of return, and the President told us that we'll be doing beyond the return. He also mentioned remittances, and I want to ask, are we doing well when it comes to remittance inflows? I was looking at some data from the World Bank. We didn't perform too poorly, if I remember the data correctly. But do you think we should leverage more on what the diasporan community and even foreigners are sending in terms of remittances? How can we leverage on these to improve our state in the country?
I mean, definitely. In terms of the economy is doing well. Ghana now is being heard of all over the world as being a beacon in West Africa. For that, the Japan of West Africa. And the reason, I think I lost you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure, Doc. Go ahead. Go ahead, please. Apologies for that. We just lost Dr. Texan there. He was making some submissions on what the president had to say. He felt there were some refreshing things in there, and we started off a discussion on the year of return, beyond the return, the impacts. I asked him a question about remittances and how we can leverage on that to propel growth. The finance minister some time ago spoke about issuing diaspora bonds, essentially raising money from Ghanaians living outside the shores of Ghana. We'll ever see that in the coming years, we are yet to know. At this point, we'll take a quick break. This is the business edition of PM Express. My guest you just heard, Dr. Ebo Texan, is an economist with the University of Ghana Economics Department, and Mr. Appiah Adomako. He's with CATS International. We'll be right back.
Lost them.
Hi, you're welcome back from the break. And let's just cut straight to Dr. Texan. We lost him on the line there before we went on the break. Doc, if you can hear me.
I'm sorry I lost you.
Oh, not a problem, Doc. So I was asking about us leveraging on remittances. You were about making your point when we lost you. If you can go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was saying that, yes. I mean, once you are able to get these African, people of African descent coming into your economy and making the place very comfortable, and they make the place their home, government remittances will come in. Don't forget that we also have thousands of Ghanaians out there who, once in a while, take a look back at home to find out if things are going well. When they have confidence in the economy, they remit money into the economy. And also not only in terms of remittances, but to make Ghana a place to invest, a land of opportunity where our indigenous can come and invest here so that we have the resources that we need to fund our development. So definitely, I mean, the year of return was good. We are looking at a decade of beyond the returns if we're able to put in place attractive things during the Christmas break for them to come down. It's always good. Tourism is going to get a boost, and so many other factors that we need in the economy to help our economy move forward.
Okay. Doc, the president also mentioned and referenced a story on Bloomberg, and I was sharing it with my guest earlier on. And the story was written again by Noah Smith. It's a Bloomberg opinion piece where it says, why Ghana is Africa's top candidate for an economic leap. And in the story more or less touts our credentials and says we have an advantage in the sub-region. However, we need to break our dependence on commodities. They, however, also add that dependence on commodities isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it gets to a point where perhaps the boom and bust of commodities may affect us adversely. I want to take on this article and this reference the president made to this article.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the most refreshing things to have said. I mean, the Bloomberg report clearly states Ghana's credentials. We tend to have relatively higher educational outcomes, and other factors are democracy, is a peaceful country, our macro indicators are now stable, and we become an attractive destination. The only bit about it are reliance on commodity exports. I mean, and that is why the 1D, 1F that the government has come up with is a laudable initiative. It is at the center of the structural problems that we have, because ever since we gained independence, we've been exporting private products. Commodity exports are not bad, as the Bloomberg report says, but then the prices of these commodities have been trending downwards over the last 100 years, and they'll do so for the next about 150 years. So if we want to build our economy on commodities, then it's not going to help us. We need to move into higher value addition. We need to move into simple manufactures. We need to move into producing things that will help us to reduce our reliance on imported goods, so that in terms of our contribution to our trade, we are going to be a net exporter of even simple manufacturers. And that is the only way you can be assured of the progress that Japan made in Asia and other countries made elsewhere. And don't forget that in 1960, we had the same development challenge as these Asian tigers, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, and then Hong Kong. But look at where they've gotten to. And the path that they took to those levels of development are clearly the path that we need to start on. And so, 1D1F, which is part of the industrialization drive, is a good step towards that direction. We need to move into higher value addition. And of course, to do all of these things, you also need to increase the labor skills that we have in this country. So it's important that we concentrate on technical vocational education, which is key to having a well-equipped labor force that would support the industrialization. You cannot industrialize the economy when the labor force is not skilled. So we need to concentrate on team-led education and also make sure that our labor force is highly skilled. If we don't get a high skill, but we are even somewhat in the middle, that's fine. So that we can kickstart our industrialization that Nkrumah started back there as we were developing. So it's important that we move away from commodities. It's very, very important because, that alone cannot help us. Countries like Botswana and other countries, Namibia, have moved into manufacture. And that is why their economies are doing so well. So it's important that we begin higher value addition. And 1D1F is certainly a way to go in terms of adding value to what we export and then also producing import substitutes for consumption so that we don't over-rely on imports, because that is also part of the problem that we face. And the reason why our city is not able to hold its strength, because we are always demanding imports and we need the dollars to import. So quite clearly, the message has something on that, which is important. But of course, in all of these things, it's part of the macro stability and all of that. If the infrastructure is not there, it's not going to help. So it's good that the NDC added a lot of infrastructure in our energy, which is good. The MPP government has also continued, and it's a step in the right direction. It's also good that we look at business processes in the economy so that the cost of doing business will reduce, because these are the sort of things that investors look at before they come into an economy. So we should make sure that the digitization of business processes are improved, and not only in terms of passports and DDMA, but in terms of obtaining permits for businesses and also getting a facility installed in your factory. And all of those business processes that enable businesses to try to improve on it and reduce the cost of doing that. I had a very fine experience on Monday when I went to the Accra Data Center to renew my passport, and I was pleasantly surprised that the environment looked more like we've seen abroad. And then within 15 minutes, the service was delivered. I didn't have to pay anything to a middleman. These are the sort of things we need to see in Ghana.
Okay.
These are the sort of things businesses would want, so that if they have to obtain a permit, then it's done very fast at no cost. When these things are done, it reduces the cost of doing business in the economy. So while the economy is stable, the macro indicators are good, the cost of doing business is also low. It becomes an attractive destination. That is why Bloomberg were very certain that the way we are going, if we continue on that path, definitely Ghana is going to be the place to be. We have a 31 million population. Our economy is expanding. 6-7% is not bad. If we continue this over a period of time, definitely Ghana is on the right track. It's something that we should all be proud of.
Okay, Doc. Final one before I let you go. The president also mentioned that this has got to do with the banking sector. From Monday, they'll be paying the depositors of the MFIs and the savings and loans, the SNLs. And somebody was asking me, wouldn't that adversely impact our already laden debt figures? Let me just use that. And somebody also said we need to weigh people's funds. These are people who had incomes, jobs, etc., against even our debt issues. Your quick take on that before I let you go.
We need to take a look at the counterfactuals. Supposing the government didn't do anything about it and the financial system collapsed, the cost to the economy will far outweigh whatever cost we are incurring to get our banking system, get the financial system on a very sound foundation. There is no doubt that has come at a cost of almost 13 billion to the economy. But in all of this, it's a good lesson that we are learning. It's good that we get our financial system to get back on this track. And it's exciting when the president mentioned that it looks like the banking sector is coming up and things are getting well. It's good, but I mean, there are so many things that happen, and if the government would go ahead to make sure that anybody who has been found to have caused any loss to this state, the person is made to pay for it. That will be a deterrent. But definitely is the way to go. The government couldn't have looked on in spite of our debt to say that, yes, we don't have money. Because when people lose confidence in the financial system, they will not do business in the financial system. It's when the excess spending units send their money to the financial system, that is when the financial system is able to also transfer these resources to those who have deficit spending units for investment. So the financial system plays a very critical role in mobilizing domestic resources for investment and development. And therefore, when issues come up, and it has to even come at a cost to the nation to make sure that people do not lose confidence in the financial system, I don't think it's too much for a government to do. And every government globally will take the stance that the central bank did. And we need to commend the central bank authorities for having done a good job. There are jobs that have been lost, but if you have stayed on and the financial system have collapsed, there will be much more jobs that will be lost than now. What we need to do is to find out ways in which you can get the financial sector, the banking sector, to grow so that those who lost their jobs will get back into the system. But in the interim, I think that the move that the government is making to sort out all depositors is in the right direction. So people have confidence that the financial system is a place where they can launch their surplus spending unit, so that surplus spending funds, so that the government can, the financial system can make it available for investment.
Dr. Texan, I want to say a very, very, very big thank you for your time here on PM Express Business Edition. For our viewers out there, that's Dr. Ebo Texan. He's an economist and senior lecturer at the University of Ghana, Econs Department. He's also the program coordinator for the Economic Policy Management Program at the University of Ghana, Econs Department. Dr. Texan, have a very good night and thank you once again. So, Mr. Adomako, a lot Dr. Texan shared with us. I realized when we spoke, before we went on the break, when we spoke at the financial literacy issues, you gave some good feedback in there also. The banking sector reforms, the weighing of debt, adding debt to our debt stock, and making sure people are made whole. Where would you sit if you were tasked with that choice?
I think we don't have any choice than to find resources to pay them. And about 2 weeks ago, Dr. Kwame Mpianim said that there's nothing wrong for government to print money to pay those whose money have been locked up with these institutions. Though I disagree with him a bit because it has some effect of causing some inflationary pressures on the cedis, and so we want to stay away from that. But of course, government trying to pay this money is going to also increase our debt stock. But you have to do the cost-benefit analysis. Yeah. These are people's capital, people's money that we've been locked up. And so once you give it back to them, they are going to invest the money in the economy, going to create jobs, consumption, and government is also going to get taxes from the money that they are paid back. So I think that the cost-benefit analysis will justify. But how long should we have to be doing this? Because I remember some time ago, we did the same thing of paying people whose money were locked up. And if we do not put up the right measures, in 5 or 10 years,
we're back to square one.
We're back to square one. And that is one area, one thing that I want us to, the government to focus so that this kind of mess doesn't happen again in the future.
During Dr. Texan's submissions on remittances, I saw you noting some stuff down on your tab or iPad there. Do you have anything to share with us specifically when it comes to the world of remittances?
Well, I don't have anything substantial, but I would say that when you look at the World Bank normally publishes this League of Remittances. And I think in Africa, Ghana, we rank 5th or so after Nigeria.
Yes,
Egypt,
I think
and
Nigeria was first at the last one. I have to check that data, but I think Nigeria was the best
Nigeria,
in terms of inflows.
Egypt, even some of the Francophone countries were also doing very well. But I remember some years ago, may he rest in perfect peace, Professor Kusi Adomako, he said that a nation is built with human brains, not absentee dollar remittances. Whilst these remittances are good in coming to shore our people's pocket, we cannot, mortgage the economy of this country on absentee dollar remittances, because if you do a study and you look at where these remittances are going, they are not going to any productive sectors of the economy. Most of these are going to consumption, funerals, and other things.
What about those, Mr. Adomako, what about those who receive these funds and put it in businesses? So somebody wants to start some micro, small, or medium scale enterprise. His relative abroad sends this. He starts that business. I have friends, several stories of people who have received funds from abroad and have turned over these funds into businesses. So we can't say it's all for consumption, can we?
I think we have a data that I'm privy to that most of startup capitals are from Ghana than those that are coming from outside. And so we shouldn't have that belief that money remittances are coming for people to do. But though there are some who receives funds from abroad for investment, but large chunk of the money goes into funerals and other non-productive sectors of the economy. And I think as a country, we need to look at how we can sustain our future and be able to create jobs and be able to take jobs outside, like the way South African businesses are doing in Ghana now. Yeah. They have been able to export their companies here. At the end of the day, they make profit, repatriate the dollars back into South Africa to show up their economy. These are some of the measures that government needs to take to help Ghanaian businesses to also go to the West African sub-region, say that at the end of the year, when they declare profit and their dividends, they can also bring those money back into Ghana in dollars, so that we will not have to suffer forex losses.
Mr. Adomako, we are running down on time, but I want us to do two key things.
Okay.
The president spoke about some foreign companies coming in terms of assembling car parts. And he mentioned VW, Sinotruk, Toyota, Nissan, and then Hyundai. What's your look on this? Someone may sit here and say, look, this is good stuff. We are moving along the industrial base. And somebody might say, we've done this before somewhere in the 50s or 60s, and it's run out, and we're back again. How do we sustain this? What's your outlook on that?
I think from a start, I would say it's a good initiative, but there is more that Ghana needs to do, because if you are coming to assemble a car in this country and almost everything is being imported into the country, the job creation on it is going to be very small. Okay. What I know in some countries, for example in India, if you want to assemble a car in India, you have to source not less than 35% of the parts that you are going to use for the car in Indian market, so that the Indian companies will also find jobs and be able to produce and sell to you, to be on their supply chain ladder. So if Toyota is coming and everything is being imported, then I think the benefit that we are going to get will not be that much. Meanwhile, these companies will also get huge tax holidays. And I think if we are serious, government needs to let them know that, look, these are the parts that we can produce. Look at how much money that we have invested in our TVET institutions and our polytechnics. So if we invest some resources there, we can also be part of their supply chain. And I think that is the best thing, the best side that I want to see, not just having 10 companies coming to set up their assembly plant in Ghana.
Okay, Mr. Adomako, final one as we draw down the curtain. And I'm quoting from the president's speech. Things are working in Ghana, and Ghana is surely changing. Mr. Speaker, our nation is in good health and in good, competent hands. Will you agree with these sentiments that, frankly speaking, all is well and good, and Ghana is being steered onto a path, a sustainable trajectory of prosperity and growth. Will you agree with that?
I think it's a very big question, and the answer is either yes or no. But I would say that we have seen some remarkable improvement in terms of what the figures are saying. But however, when you walk down the street and you talk to people, these macroeconomic figures are not translating into the betterment for everybody. I think there's more that we need to do to be able to connect these figures to livelihood. That is one thing that I want to see. We don't need to end up with this high-sounding statistical data, but we also need to see that the lifestyle of Ghanaians, people can afford, decent meal, people can make good choices. Currently, for example, we've spent a lot of resources on NHIS, but when you go to hospital, you still have to dip your hands into your pocket to be able to pay for out-of-pocket expenses. And I think we need to see that government policies and actions are leading to the right outcome, thereby seeing very huge, visible improvement into the lives of the people.
Mr. Adomako, this question, I'm sure you've heard it being asked by people to people. We're in an election year. We're out of an IMF program. Our election years, apart from the year 2004, have been characterized by fiscal slippages. What do you think this year will be? We've passed a fiscal responsibility law. We've told the international community that we will do what is right to maintain stability. Do you think we have the grit to ensure that this is done in this election year? Do that for me in 1 minute.
Okay, I think we are capable of doing it. And I think consistently we've seen that government has been able to spend below 5% of...
According to the president?
Yeah, according to the president. And so if we're able to discipline ourselves, I don't think that there will be any fiscal slippage in this electioneering year. But politicians are politicians. Sometimes whatever they need to do to win elections, they may have to promise more in an electioneering year. I wouldn't be disappointed or surprised if we slip beyond the 5% mark.
But it has repercussions for the finance minister.
Yes.
The law.
Yes. But of course, I don't know what sanctions that he can go to jail for spending beyond that. The only thing Parliament can do is to write to reprimand him.
That was Mr. Appiah Kusi Adomako. He's the country director for CATS International. We also had Dr. Ebo Texin. He's an economist and senior lecturer with the Economics Department, University of Ghana. My name is Philip Nanfuri, and this has been the business edition of PM Express. I wish you a good evening, and I pray you've learned something new. Celebrating 25 years. Good night.